Hello, everyone. Uh, this is Bernhard Kappa. I'm the founder and CEO of Orthogonal. I'm usually on these webinars, but more as a panelist. But my colleague Randy Horton isn't able to join us today, and he asked me to um, be the host for today's webinar. So if I do a bad job of hosting, you'll have the real guy next time. Um, Introduction, a lot of you are folks that listen to our webinars a lot. Let me tell you a little bit about Orthogonal first, and then get into introducing the topic and our panelists. Um, I founded this company about 15 years ago. And Orthogonal builds software as a medical device, connected device systems, really what we're calling now digital ecosystems for devices. And we work with lots of different folks, everything from CGMs to insulin pumps, to nerve stimulators, to uh, things like uh, uh, cardiac monitoring and surgical robotics, surgical planning, connecting all of those things together. A lot of what we do is agile, cloud native, really applying test automation, design controls automation together, and really accelerating the process and adding flexibility to this. And so we build, we co-build, and we help companies build centers of excellence. That's the last you're going to hear about what orthogonal does, but obviously cybersecurity in that context is a really big thing, and it's something we need to keep on top of. And so we've decided to bring together a set of experts to talk about that, what the current state of cybersecurity is. There's been recent updates to FDA guidance, but cybersecurity is always moving, and there's always changes happening the more connected the world gets, right? We typically have this run for an hour, 45 minutes, 50 minutes of speaking, and then answering questions. Typically, we will stay as long as people have questions, up to a half hour beyond the hour. And typically we get about half the people still staying for the last 30 minutes or so. Welcome everyone and looking forward to our conversation. Let me start with introductions. So I'm Bernhard Kappa, CEO of Orthogonal. You guys already know about me. I am joined by my colleague Megan Graham. She is the head of regulatory and quality at Orthogonal. Christian Espinosa, who is the CEO of Blue Goat Cyber, and last but not least, Oleg Yusim, who is the VP and Chief Product Security, Chief VP and Chief of Product Security at Illumina. Um, I'd love you guys to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit more about you and what you do in cybersecurity and medical devices. I will start with Oleg since I mentioned him last. Oleg, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bernard. Yeah, as Bernard mentioned, I'm leading product security in Illumina. I'm Chief Product Security Officer. Um, Before that, I was essentially doing the same thing in Edwards Life Sciences. I worked for, I would say, last 10 years in medical devices, product security, uh, building programs and leading teams. So that's me.
Thanks, Oleg. And Oleg is actually joining us from Singapore. And thank you very much for for doing this right now. I think you're there for a week, but you had to wake up. Uh,
Indeed,
it,
indeed, Bernard. I will try to my best to stay awake for the duration of this webinar.
awesome. Well, thank you. We all appreciate your sacrifice in this particular case. Um, Christian, you are next.
Hi, I'm Christian Espinoza, the founder and CEO of Blue Goat Cyber. We focus on medical device cybersecurity, uh, and we have three main offerings. One is consulting, so from the early stage for design and through the whole life cycle. So we do pre-market submissions, which includes all the documentation, all the testing, and we do post-market management as well. We do basically end-to-end cybersecurity focused on medical devices.
Yeah, and we like Christian's company a lot. They're a good partner, and I think they really know what they're doing. So that's been that I think that's very good for us to collaborate with, and I think for anyone who is looking for help in cybersecurity. Megan, last but not least.
Hi, everyone. I am Megan Graham. Like Bernhard said, I'm VP of Regulatory and Quality at Orthogonal. I'm over 25 years in medical device, focusing on software and medical device, software as medical device, digital health. So really focus on bringing cybersecurity into the product lifecycle and into the product, preparing the defensible position, the strategy for products, medical devices or medical device adjacent. How are you going to launch it? How are you going to make sure that your device has sufficient cybersecurity, both pre-market and post-market? So great to be here today with these very, very deep experts on cyber.
Awesome. So maybe let's just start with the with FDA guidance, right? The FDA has been putting out guidance left and right around cybersecurity for I want to say the last 6 or 7 years. So they've been extremely active, and as we talk to the FDA, it's it's a big deal for them, and it's frankly been a big deal for the whole U.S. government, both in terms of national security threats, but also just the threats within connected ecosystems, right? Um, Megan, tell me, there's the latest guidance. Tell me where we are with guidance. What is in the latest guidance? Why should we care?
Sure. So the FDA has had guidance on cybersecurity, multiple guidance documents for several years now. And in June, they issued a new version of the cybersecurity for, quality management system considerations. This is kind of the primary one if you're preparing a submission to the FDA, what they're expecting. If you have had a cyber device in the past or had software in your medical device, you're probably not going to be surprised by some of the content. But if you have a hardware device that has a USB port, for example, you might be surprised to learn that some of the changes in this particular guidance, and you're going to want to understand this guidance very well. One of the changes is really clarifying, the FDA has clarified what it means to be a cyber device. So it's no surprise if you had software, if you can connect to the internet, if there's any way that you can connect to an internet, the FDA is now considering your device to be a cyber device. So that's a big change. Another change is they've really further clarified that cybersecurity is not just about something you put in your product and submit and you're done. There is a full life cycle process for managing security throughout the pre and post market responsibilities for medical device manufacturers. They also really emphasize, the best way to get high quality in your device is true also for security, and that's to design it in. So they put a greater emphasis on that security by design, security in your architecture, and the overall secure product development framework. And then last but not least, this has been an upticking trend for FDA in particular over the past few years, is it's not just about your particular medical device. It's really about how your medical device intersects with the hospital system, other systems, so that it can be kind of a, a good neighbor, right? And not create cyber risk for the organization. So they're really putting a greater emphasis on the overall system, the ecosystem, the whole framework where your medical device operates. So if these are things that you haven't thought of before, this is where you're going to want to talk to some of these guys and really understand what you need to be thinking about in terms of the security posture of your device.
Oleg and Christian, you guys have anything to add to this?
I think the guidance really not a lot changed from my perspective, except some clarity around what a cyber device is. Specifically, they call it a USB port, a serial port, magnetic coils, which is RFID, NFC. So any type of connectivity, even HDMI, if you have software and an interface, basically you are a cyber device. So that's the clarity they provided, because there was a lot of confusion on that, especially like as Megan said with a USB port. People thought, well, that doesn't connect to the internet, but I can plug a Wi-Fi adapter or Ethernet adapter and connect it to the internet or anything else really into that USB port.
Oleg?
Agreed. Agreed. No, I think Christian and Megan covered it all. It's really been a very, I would say, heated discussion for last couple of years, ever since the initial version of this guidance been published, about should or should not we consider device with USB port a cyber device. And last year, FDA published that addendum to clarify that yes, we should. And this year, they made it officially part of the guidance. For that exact reason, all of those sports, for that exact reason, which Christian mentioned, even so, they technically are not internet ports and they don't have network stack associated with them. There are adapters associated with those ports, USB to network adapter, serial to network adapter. And as long as those ports are present, attacker can take advantage of it and make this device network connected, even if it wasn't sold this way in the beginning. So FDA clearly drew the line and said, look, if you have the ports, it means those are cyber devices. And if it is a cyber device, then the entire stringency of our latest guidance would apply to you. And you should take all of that in consideration as you building these devices, you maintaining it in the field, and all that. So I would say a very significant step for FDA in their journey of enforcing security and bringing security into medical devices. This is a very solid milestone considering where we are starting from and 2014 guidance, which was 9 pages
Right.
altogether, right? So
Yeah, I would say, it just sort of the emphasis keeps get on cybersecurity and the importance of cybersecurity keeps getting dialed up, right? It's not necessarily a change, but it's sort of like there are no shortcuts around cybersecurity, I think is really, the message. And you can't just say, oh, that does not apply to us, as I think a lot of folks did. Um, One of the things that I think is not necessarily a change necessarily, but it's something that has been in the guidance for a while. If for especially for devices or software that is in an ecosystem or on multiple function devices, smartphones, laptops, cloud, etc., or connect in with those things. there's the multiple function device guidance that the FDA has, which is very good about drawing the boundary of the medical device and what you care about in terms of sort of the patient risk of the medical device, and then sort of and how other things can impact the patient risk. But if you look at cybersecurity, and I've had this confirmed with in my conversations with the FDA, that explicitly, if you read the guidance, does not apply. In other words, you can't draw a boundary around your medical device and say everything outside of that from a cybersecurity perspective, we don't care about. You have to take the entire system, and any threats that that come in can potentially attack vectors, et cetera, on parts of the system, and you have to really apply cybersecurity design controls as far out as the cybersecurity risk is, which is interesting, both in a hospital setting and outside, where you have, patient worn or implanted or portable devices connected to smartphones, connected to the cloud, etc. Interesting differences in terms of some of the issues there. We were talking about this earlier. We had a conversation, I think, on Monday with this group. And Oleg, I think you had something very interesting to say there on, in the hospital system, where the threats are and what that really looks like, that I think I hadn't considered so much, but I think is really important.
Oh, sure, sure. Thank you, Bernard. And I would say the interesting angle, which I find for myself very helpful to always remember about, as in my company we're doing analysis of the threats associated with one or another instrument. It's very important to remember that outside of the whole medical device world, outside of the idea that if attacker gonna break into that instrument, then attacker can modify some kind of data and cause the harm to the patient by doing that. It is important to remember that that medical device, after all, is also a computer connected to the network. And what is also very important, medical devices are very rarely monitored. I would say practically never monitored. And maybe let me make a little emphasis on that. If you are hospital IT, you want to see, you should be able to monitor all the computers, servers, or endpoints, laptops connected to your network. You should be able to see what's going on there, monitor for behaviors which you don't like to see from cybersecurity perspective, and be able to immediately impact them, affect them to counter a potential threat, right? And so that is true for all our computers. They all running a whole bunch of cybersecurity agents, allowing for that degree of control which I just described. It is true for servers, but it is not true for medical device. Not only medical device does not run all these agents, it is very often is not capable of running those agents. And it is a well-known limitation. So now let's put an attacker hat on and think for a second. I have computer, powerful computer, connected to the network. And that is a black box for hospital IT and cybersecurity. Well, bingo, that is amazing target, which I would like to break into. I would like to make it a foothold for my potential exploitation of the hospital system. And I would like to start my lateral movement into the hospital system and, let's say, a ransomware network from there. And we have cybersecurity reports, which he's been publishing last, I don't know, 7 years maybe by now. which confirmed that they saying that 5 to 10% of successful attacks on hospitals start from medical device, from compromising medical device. So that's the angle I'm trying to keep in mind, that even if my analysis might show that no significant damage to data can be done, but I do see that attacker has a potential to compromise that instrument and turn it into the foothold. Well, that is a huge risk. That is a huge risk for the hospital, and that angle, that device can be attacked, not for the sake of affecting that particular patient and changing that particular set of data, but just because that device will be compromised for the sake of attacking hospital network further and propagating into it. I think it's a very viable angle to keep in mind.
Five to
Yes.
10, 5 to 10% of ransomware attacks, hospital ones that come from medical devices. That's a pretty, you know, we do think about the medical device cybersecurity in the direction of keep the medical device safe, but the analysis really has to be larger than that. Christian,
That,
is it how real is this threat in hospital systems? Because I think you guys do a lot of pen testing and things in for hospital systems as well, right?
Well, the threat is serious. It's definitely real. We consider, from a medical device perspective, when we help a manufacturer secure a medical device, we consider that device is going into a hostile network. I know it's a hospital network, but we consider it hostile, meaning it's going to be attacked over and over and over. And we have done penetration testing probably against 50 different hospitals. There hasn't been a single hospital we have not got full access into. And sometimes it is through a hospital vulnerability in a hospital system, and sometimes it's through a medical device. Typically, it's a misconfigured medical device with a default password. So just like any other IoT device, and we like to call medical devices IOMT, the Internet of Medical Things, the organization that's responsible for setting it up has to set it up properly and securely, and the manufacturer needs to provide that guidance. And the challenge is, like Oleg alluded to, it is a black box, just like an IoT device at your house. You can't manage it. There's no endpoint protection you can install on it. But there are things you can do, and these things are basic things that are typically skipped, such as put it on a separate segment of the network and have some filtering with a router between the segments of the network. There are a lot of things you can do, but those are often skipped. Uh, and hospitals are, I think, trying to improve their security, but they're not having much luck, because just when you think there can't possibly be a bigger data breach, there's a bigger one with some hospital releases it. So like I said, I consider hospital networks hostile, and it's very challenging to secure a hospital network because you can't manage these medical devices. They're legacy medical devices that have lots of vulnerabilities before we even got to like cybersecurity for medical devices being mandated by the FDA. So it's a very challenging scenario, and I feel like we're making a little bit of progress, but not too much. And I think it goes back to the fundamentals in cybersecurity. Most people want to do like 100 things versus do the top 5 right. If you do 100 things sort of half-ass, it's not going to help you with security. It's better to do the top 5 100% right. That will in a prioritized manner, and that will improve your security. But we try to do way too many things and with way too many frameworks.
Yeah. I mean, obviously things keep changing and there are new threats and the environments keep getting more complex, but the fact is you've got all this legacy stuff happening in the hospital, and that makes it a challenging environment for hospitals of all kind, and frankly a ripe target. And we see lots and lots of ransomware attacks. We had this here. I'm in Chicago, and Lurie Children's Hospital here in Chicago, famous and very well regarded children's hospital, had that happen to them, and it took quite a while to get out of that. I don't remember exactly the cause, but and so I don't remember whether that was a medical device cause or not. But those are both huge problems for the healthcare system, but also potential liabilities for medical device companies if your device was one of those 5 to 10%, right?
Yeah, well,
Um,
there was a case with a blood establishment collection system. It's considered a medical device. Had ransomware, a ransomware attack. It was down for I think 3 weeks, and it was in the UK. And some patients died because they couldn't get a transfusion. They couldn't get anything done with their blood. So, a lot of people say there hasn't been any fatalities because of medical devices, but even a ransomware, that's example of fatalities. But even ransomware in a hospital can be attributed to fatalities because if an ambulance arrives with somebody having a heart attack and they can't intake that patient because all their systems are down, every second counts. If you have a heart attack, people have died. So it's about time we kind of consider this a serious matter. And it's very challenging to secure hospitals, but the risk is super high, especially to patient safety. And I think we need to like up level our security and consider it not just from the perspective of HIPAA, but from the perspective of patient safety.
mhm, mhm,
And that is how the FDA has positioned it. And I think it's really important for medical device manufacturers to understand that cybersecurity can present a patient's safety risk, right? Not just with their, loss of data, but that's as you're designing a medical device, you have to think about the ways that it can fail and fail in a bad way that you don't want. And that's where cybersecurity by design fits in, and thinking about not just how do we rationalize why we don't do that, because you can mitigate risk, maybe collect less protected data or something like that. But you're going to be operating in this environment, and you don't want to you don't want your system to go down. You need your system to be trustworthy. You need your system to be resilient. And you really do need to be thinking about security as, I call it the abilities. This is, designing for high robust systems that are used that need to be safe and need to do what they need to do when they need to do them.
And that's a good point, Megan. I mean, the data is important, your protected health information, but it's almost what is secondary to attacking a patient. An example I like to give is Dick Cheney had his wireless functionality of his defibrillator disabled because there was a threat somebody could wirelessly connect to him and shock him to death. So imagine you have a vulnerability in your defibrillator and someone can shock you to death. While they're shocking you to death, do you care if someone's stealing your protected health information? Which one is a higher priority, right? Probably someone being able to kill you versus the inconvenience of your health information being stolen, which is already all of it's already been stolen like dozens of times anyway.
That's right. It's the having it in the right framework. It's not separate per se. It is part and parcel to designing a safe and effective medical device.
so Oleg, Christian mentioned, do 5 things right. When you are, obviously you have to do more than 5 things right, but at least do those 5 things right. As you're thinking about it and you're just sort of, how do you think about it, and what are kind of the most important things for people to do in their cybersecurity analysis and mitigation, and what are things that people maybe forget to do that you see frequently? Because obviously you guys have devices and you have people working for you and lots of things that are going on. What do you tell your people?
Mm. Well, that is such a rich question. I can talk about that for 3 hours and don't repeat myself. Let's try to give it a short version. So so couple of things. So first of all, what I'm trying to tell people is that Christian is right. that an attempt to count on the fact that hospital will take care of their network is not the right attempt. That we should consider hospital a hostile environment. We should consider the worst possible case scenario where hospital will not do an appropriate work to protect our instruments and build them in a way where they can stand their ground, even if everything around into compromise and compromised and fail. So that's one very important item. The couple of other ones is frankly, it's not around controls of medical device instrument, but it's more around process, which and steps of the program. So specifically, yes, of course, it is very important step of building cybersecurity into the design and shipping instruments secure by design and secure by default, which is another concept introduced recently by Microsoft. And I'm a huge fan of that concept because there is always that debate of what if our customers don't like that security feature? What if our customers don't support it? Not all our customers can support that security feature. Well, that's fine, but we're gonna ship our instrument insecure by default state, right? We might protect our instruments in their default configuration and provide ability to customers, those customers who would like to weaken that security, that opportunity, but with a message that it will significantly weaken their security and there's a risk associated with it. That is a very important consideration because very often when you are a medical device manufacturer, you don't want to lose customers because you over-secure the product. But that is where you're taking a very important decision to ship devices in secure state rather than ship them in non-secure state. So very important. And a couple of other things too. So again, very important to remember that you have to build devices secure by design, ship them secure by default, do all the measures of deep integration for security engineers to accomplish that with R&D teams. But it is also critical to remember you have to keep those devices secure as after you ship them. And that is the entirely different chapter, but providing patches, routine patches, providing continuous monitoring for vulnerabilities, not just SBOM, but also for potential misconfigurations, running penetration tests, hi Christian, continuously and frequently. That is paramount and of post-market support, because we shouldn't just once build the device in secure state and ship it in secure by the default state, but we also should keep it in that state as it's been deployed in a field. So this is a couple of very important paramount items which I'm trying to center the programs around and remind people who I'm working with about. Does it make sense?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Christian, do you have any something to add to that?
Well, I think the challenge is designing cybersecurity into a product. From our experience, that is almost always overlooked, and there's a lot of assumptions and a lot of reasons why it's overlooked. One of the reasons it's overlooked is there's an assumption that software developers understand cybersecurity. From our experience, that is not true. And It's not true because it's a different function. Software developers are used to building something with functional requirements, a user interface, uh, and it works as intended. Whereas penetration testers are used to making the product do something it's not intended to do and breaking the product. So it's a very different lens we're looking at the same problem through or the same software through. Anyone that comes to us and says, well, we've outsourced the software development of our product and they have a cybersecurity person on staff. We start asking questions and it quickly breaks down that they really don't understand the context of what needs to be done from a secure software development lifecycle perspective and adding those what we call non-functional requirements into the device, which are the cybersecurity requirements. So I think that is one of the biggest challenges because most people sort of forget about it until the very end. Unfortunately, we're in a very regulated industry. So before a device can get cleared in the United States by the FDA, it has to meet a certain degree of rigor from a cybersecurity lens. Other industries, there is no rigor if it's not regulated. So all these devices just make it on the market. So the bottom line is people don't care about cybersecurity unless it's mandated. And now that it's mandated, it's become a problem for a lot of manufacturers. And part of what we're trying to do at Blue Goat is raise the awareness. Like if you consider this early on in the design, because it should be from design to disposal, cybersecurity should be considered the whole life cycle. If you consider early on in design, it will cost you way less money than trying to bolt it on at the end right before you try to get your device cleared into market. So that's one of our missions is to raise that awareness because it's super frustrating for a manufacturer to get a device almost to market and then they forgot about cybersecurity and it gets kicked back from the FDA with deficiencies and now they have to redo everything. They have to go back and ask for more investment. It delays the timeline. If there's a competitor out there, they might get their product to market faster. It's a big problem that we're trying to shift way to the left so it doesn't become such a inconvenience and frustration for everybody.
I completely agree, Christian. I think what you said about having those different perspectives, where you have I always called it the build perspective, and then the break, how can it break perspective, and medical device to build resilient systems. This is something that medical device manufacturers, if you haven't been doing it already, it works really well for all types of those ilities, like for reliability or resiliency. Having that deeper expertise, really understand how you're going to build that security in is so important. And having those different perspectives at the end, you get that really resilient device. So it's something that the FDA is a huge fan of. It's very effective in terms of a best practice. And my experience has been, and I think our experience has been that it's actually by the end of your product life cycle, you're in a much more predictable state. You've already figured out the majority of the issues. You're not being surprised later, and surprises are not good for a system that has to be safe and effective. You don't like being surprised once it goes on the market that there's a major failure that you didn't think about, because that has big implications. So I completely agree with that approach, Christian.
Yeah, and since we're in a highly regulated industry, and I know you Orthogonal follows IEC 62304, so you're used to developing software in a highly regulated industry. I think one of the other challenges, a lot of manufacturers will choose a software development firm that is not familiar with the regulations or IEC 62304, and we see that quite often, actually.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in that um, the um, you need to incorporate this kind of throughout your product life cycle in the same way that patient risk management is something that you're doing very early on and throughout the process, and you should be all the way through monitoring and feeding that back into the system. Cybersecurity is the same way. You need those eyes and those experts in there early and throughout the process. You will find that if you have a software developer who's a good software developer who doesn't necessarily have the experience with patient risk management or with cybersecurity risk management as they work with the experts during the process, they will pick things up and be, and become better at that. But there's never, it's not their primary job. It is part of their job, and you need that expertise throughout the process, I would say.
For sure. It's a team effort.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that is to me is interesting, right? We work with folks that have things like surgical robots and that are inside the operating room, surgical planning that is accessible from outside the hospital, and nowadays we are connecting all of those things together with digital implants, et cetera. So we're working across different things there. But the big challenges there are still inside the hospital, and that's sort of the big fear of connecting your robot to the outside. We have the other side of it where we're working with folks like insulin pump manufacturers, CGMs, et cetera, and these are all things that are happening outside of the hospital that are implanted, patient worn, et cetera. It's a different set of considerations, but also a different set of tools you have in those cases, right? So uh, less likely that with an insulin pump or a CPAP machine that you are going to that is in the home that you're going to cause a ransomware attack in a hospital. But if you do get in to that system, not an individual device, but into the system overall, there's the potential for disabling or causing problems with 400,000 or 500,000 devices in the case of an insulin pump manufacturer, or in the case of a CPAP machine, 6 million devices out there, right? So far it hasn't happened, but if that happens, that's a really, really bad issue, right? Um, on the other hand, it's not a black box if you design it right for those types of things, because you can monitor those things, right? You can monitor your cloud, you can monitor the mobile apps, you can monitor the Bluetooth traffic, et cetera, and you can actually see those threats. And as a manufacturer, you have a responsibility for doing that, but you also have really, really good tools. Um, I guess the question I'd have is, so why can't we do that inside the hospital? What are the barriers to doing that inside the hospital? And are those barriers that should come down, or should they stay the way they are?
Good question. Good question. Now let me try to give a shot into it, and then I would be curious to hear Christian perspective on it as well. So the major reason why we cannot do that in a hospital is twofold. So first, hospitals still largely very resistant to open connections in unless that's absolutely needed. And the reason for that, Christian just surfaced half an hour ago, explaining how what percentage of success his team had pen testing hospitals. So frankly, hospitals are not the richest organizations in the world, and especially when it comes to funding their IT and cybersecurity. And they recognize their vulnerable state, and they try to mitigate that risk by reducing potential attack surface through reduction of amount of connections coming in. So so that's definitely one of the reasons. Can it change? Sure, it can. Will it change anytime soon? Well, that's a very good question, right? the other point is more about medical devices itself. We did mention the black box concept also maybe a half of hour ago. Let me elaborate a little more on that. When we're talking about medical devices, we have a certain amount of restriction about software which we can just add into medical device after it was already approved by FDA, right? And we also have certain amount of restrictions around device resources. Those resources are finite, and unfortunately, when we see the spike of usage of, let's say, processor or memory on an instrument, then it can negatively impact the main function of the instrument. And that's a problem for majority of medical devices in the field today. And it's a difficult problem to solve because also the way cybersecurity tools are manufactured today, it's hard to govern them by saying, well, you just don't spend that more than this percentage of my processor or more than that percentage of my memory. It's just not always working out. And so in a way, by allowing your device not to be a black box, you also are increasing the chances that your device will not perform well in a critical moment when doctor really needs it. So that is also a very serious problem to attack and solve. And so far, it is being one, I would say, medical devices at large did not fully capture. So medical devices industry is trying to go around those problems, trying to introduce the types of the systems which can monitor for vulnerabilities internally, but does not require spikes of resources usage. But those systems typically will not talk out. They will just be a silent watchdog on the instrument itself, trying to prevent unauthorized applications from being loaded and executed. So I hope that gives an idea kind of how world inside the hospital perimeter is a little different from the world outside. And again, Christian, your perspective would be very interested here too.
Well, I mentioned like doing the top 5 things very well earlier. One of them is knowing thyself. I've yet to be in any environment where the IT staff could provide a up-to-date network diagram. So I understand these these medical devices are black boxes, but they don't even know their own devices on their own network typically. So from my perspective, we have to understand they're going to be black box. We can't install endpoint protection or any other agents on them for a number of reasons. Like you mentioned, they're critical devices. Endpoint protection and all this management takes up a lot of resources. You certainly can't install that on a battery operated implantable. So we have to realize these are black boxes and there are things we can do which go back to knowing thyself. So if I'm going to install this black box on my network, I can set it up. I can look at the traffic it sends, where it connects to, and then I can put it on a separate segment and put a firewall, which most routers do filtering, and just filter the traffic. And that greatly reduces the attack surface. But this rarely happens. Most people will put the device just on their one big segment, one big network. So now if I can attack this black box device, right next door to it is the EMR, and I can attack that. Right next door to that is another device. So there are ways to protect this, and it's as simple as network segmentation. But from my experience, that is grossly ignored. And the other challenge, and this is, I think, Bernhard, you mentioned like the average IT budget in a hospital is like 1% to 2% or something like that.
Yeah.
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 So all of these devices require management. All these tools require someone to understand the tool, learn how to use the tool, learn how to use a device, learn how to manage it. And when we are not increasing the budget, it's almost an impossible task to manage all of these disparate devices that have very from different manufacturers, in addition to your typical IT systems on the environment. So it's a very challenging problem that I don't think we've got a good handle on. And my wife used to be a nurse, and the budgets at hospitals are like so highly scrutinized that they're always understaffed, and not just in nursing, but also in the IT. So this is a larger problem that we need to like holistically zoom out, I think, to try to fix between healthcare delivery organizations and medical device manufacturers and just how these things are run all together.
Yeah, yeah. I think, there if you sort of we're in an industry that's really complex with lots of complex and incentives that aren't necessarily the way you would design them for for what's best for cost and patient outcomes, right? We've just legacy of lots of different things. But there are things that we could at least point to where we would like to go to on these things. Certainly, there is a huge benefit to those devices not necessarily being purely black boxes for the device manufacturer, understanding how the devices are being used, what problems there are with devices, and being able to manage those things uh, is super helpful, right? There's also potential benefit to hospital systems and to clinicians, et cetera, if you can collect that data and provide data back to physicians, to hospital systems, et cetera. Um, and so that's certainly what a lot of medical device companies are arguing in, for the next generation of medical devices. Let us connect in. Here's how we can create value and keep you safe. And that's certainly part of the process of designing new systems. But in a case where you have 1%, maybe 2% spent on IT, that is there's not a lot of ability to change and to do new things in that. You're really having a hard time just keeping all the balls in the air in that particular case. And I think that's one of the big challenges in working with hospital systems, right?
Yeah, and as you were speaking, I think we've sort of evolved from black box to more gray box, as I would
Yes.
say, because there's a major push by the FDA for transparency. Like you have to provide labeling of your device with all the risk. You have to make the software bill of materials public knowledge if someone wants to access that. So there's a big push where it may seem like it's black box, but it's way less black box today because you have access to the complete software bill of materials. You know all the third-party libraries. The manufacturer is supposed to label the risk associated with it from a cybersecurity lens. They're supposed to provide operating guidance and everything else. So it's a little less black box than it used to be, but I still see as not, obviously white box.
And there's big push for, over the air updates, et cetera, as well. Sort of the ability to continue to maintain your devices and respond to all the active cybersecurity threats and new things that are discovered. Um,
Yeah,
there are
that's
a number.
to me the over there updates is I get super nervous when we start talking about that because we've worked with manufacturers where their update infrastructure is connected to the same network as their human resources department. So
Yes.
if the human resource person clicks on a phishing email, now a malicious attacker can affect the update infrastructure and push a malicious update to all of the medical devices at the same time, which
Yeah,
is a
and I
concern.
and I've seen this in large companies, small companies, et cetera, where there's active work around that. But, you know, people are the biggest vulnerability and people with access, et cetera. Um, Oleg, I'm sure you run across that as a concern for Illumina, right? It's like having to manage your internal systems and that as frankly as an attack vector. How do you how do you deal with that? What does that keep you up at night, or is that you know is that we got this covered and here's how we have it covered?
Hmm. It is not something that keeps me up at night. I mean, my colleague, CISO of the company, does, I would say, a very good job in compartmentalizing our networks and protecting us against situations like that. So not something which keeps me at night awake particularly. But to Christian point, that is definitely an attack angle to be considered. And yes, there are organizations where it is unfortunately not taken in consideration at all.
We got a number of questions on dealing with legacy devices, right? Lots of medical device companies have devices that that are older devices that are still in use in the hospital system, et cetera. How does current cybersecurity guidance impact those, and what should someone do? What's the right way of dealing with legacy, your own legacy devices?
I'll try that one. I think, I'll give the regulatory answer. It depends. If you have a legacy device, from a business strategy perspective, you're going to want to be thinking about your strategy to bring that into the current state for cybersecurity, either because you're going to make a change to your platform and now the FDA is going to be, you're going back to the FDA and they're going to be asking you a bunch of questions. Like, let's say you have a system and you don't plan on changing it ever. That might be okay. But at some point in time, you're going to want to make a change, and then all of those new regulations and guidance apply. But also your customers, your hospitals and clinics where your devices might be, they're going to have increasing requirements where, it was fine 2 years ago, but now you're going to have to come figure out a plan. So I think from a business strategy, it's always best to disrupt yourself rather than be disrupted. So thinking about how you want to update that technology, roll it out, give yourself a little bit of time, but definitely start thinking about that in your portfolio.
Yeah, we work with a lot of clients that have legacy devices, and all of them we put on our post-market management plan where we monitor the software bill of materials. And even though you can't just swap out the device, we are aware of the risk, and we can work with the manufacturer to come up with a plan to mitigate that risk on the device as it comes up. So a lot of people say, why don't we just update the device? But you have to zoom out and look in a healthcare environment. If a nurse is trained on a specific defibrillator, it's not as simple a matter of just replacing it. Now you have to retrain everybody to use the new tool. So there's a lot of challenges with just swapping out legacy devices that most people don't think about from a usability perspective.
That's a really good point too. I like that.
Right. I can add kind of capitalizing on Megan's. It depends. All right. Yes, the fact that device is legacy does not necessarily means that device is vulnerable or highly vulnerable. So it is seem to be a little bit of a stigma. This is a legacy device. Well, okay, this is a legacy device, but what is attack vectors we have into that device, and is it network connected device? Is it not network connected device? Is it a device not only not network connected, but with the entire let's say network stack being removed from that instrument? Or maybe it's highly network connected device. Maybe it is connected to external cloud. So again, different considerations, based on how connected this device is, how exposed it is, what the attack vectors present, and different course of actions the organization would take. Because of course, for legacy instruments, and legacy instruments typically be either at their end of life announcement, waiting for end of support announcement, or on its way there, organizations would be not willing to spend more money than absolutely necessary, right? But again, the right assessment of the attack vectors is the key for organization to make a decision how they want to update that and
Makes
how
sense.
frequent want to do it.
One of the questions we got was around differences in cybersecurity regulations between US and EU. We talked about, the activity on cybersecurity guidance from the FDA, lots and lots of guidance, draft guidance, et cetera, over the last few years. What's different in Europe? If anything, obviously you should do the same thing in terms of keeping your devices safe. The environments are similar, et cetera. But are there any particular, regulatory considerations that are different or gotchas in Europe that that folks should be aware of?
From a cybersecurity perspective, the FDA is one of the most stringent as far as getting your device cleared from the cybersecurity, all the requirements for that. The really the way, so if you pass the FDA, you can pass EU MDR. The real difference is some of the reporting requirements for EU MDR are greater than they are in the FDA.
And I was thinking yes, there's the reporting requirements, and I think practically speaking, it's the message I want to send to medical device manufacturers is the more robust your cybersecurity is, the more resilient you are to all of the regulations. Because even though there are specific differences into each geography, those regulations change over time. And the end result is kind of the bottom line is cybersecurity risk does contribute to patient safety. And so the better off you are at addressing those risks in your device and having a proactive security posture for your device, you're going to be much better off from sometimes it's not just the regulators that you want to worry about, it's actually the hospitals that you're going into or the clinics that you're going into. And when I think about it from that perspective, you can navigate the different regulatory requirements, but it's really about what's your position for your product in terms of how secure it is. And maybe it's secure by design because it's not connected. Maybe it's secure by design because you have a bunch of, security features, if you will, in place. But really, no matter where you go, cybersecurity is going to matter a lot. So even though that would be the one message I want to send is that sometimes it's the regulator, and you're right, like FDA is going to be harder from a cyber perspective, but it's not usually just the regulator that's the challenge. It's the clinic or the hospital. Getting through the IT department is going to be a lot harder than the FDA, for example. So
Yeah, I agree with that. I think doing the right thing and providing the right due diligence from a cybersecurity perspective, regardless of what's the checklist is by the FDA or the HDO, is what you should be doing. Because as a manufacturer, I should be concerned that if somebody hacks into my device, can they harm a patient? And that should be the lens I'm looking at from a due diligence perspective with cybersecurity. Not just am I checking meeting the minimum requirements by the FDA or the healthcare delivery organization.
And there are some questions in the chat. We can provide actually a list of there was a question about, what are some of the cybersecurity related documents and that kind of thing. And if you make a change to your device, is it Doctifile or not? We'll provide some resources for that and some links on the FDA's website, in particular FDA, to answer those questions. And that's your checklist, but yeah.
Oleg, anything to add on this?
Uh, no, I fully agree with Megan and Christian. Ultimately, the message is do a good job with your cybersecurity. You would be compliant with regulation automatically. It's kind of what I've been always telling my organization, because maybe on safety aspect, FD is ahead of the planet in the requirements. Maybe on privacy aspect, European Union is leading the charge. But if your overall security requirements you provide to organization kind of stand to the level of best practices, then you automatically meet and exceed all the compliance marks.
You know, in the US, at least until recently, right, things like 13485, 62304, et cetera, are recognized standards, but weren't necessarily things that are sort of mandated per se. Whereas in Europe, some of that has been maybe a little bit different. Nevertheless, we've typically found that following 1345, following 62304 provides a framework and a common language for how you go about things and document things. On the cybersecurity front, there are a lot of different things out there. 27001 is mentioned a lot. And certainly is something that we incorporate in our process, but it's not the only one, right? We look at this framework, we look at a bunch of other things that are out there. What, how do you feel about those different guidance documents? What do you look at? What do you suggest people really, know in terms of that?
Well, I think ISO 27001 is a good framework for overall IT security. We look at frameworks more specific for medical device cybersecurity, such as AMI TR 57. We also look at ISO 1345, and like you follow IEC 62304, which is great because that means you develop software in a much more secure manner than most organizations. So we like to partner with companies that follow IEC 62304. So we look at the FDA guidance also, which is very stringent on what they want tested. They want a software bill of materials, static application security testing, specifics on fuzz testing, and those are a lot more specific and granular than some of the other frameworks you may see. So we are very specific, and we provide a test plan, test cases, and a test report, which is a format that is desired in a highly regulated industry. So everything is traceable. You have full traceability and full transparency into the testing process, which is very different than traditional pen testing. You often just get a report and the results aren't reproducible. The other thing we do in this industry is, instead of looking at a risk matrix that has likelihood or probability on one axis, we look at exploitability based on CVSS, which makes it objective versus subjective. Again, so we have the repeatable test results.
Got it. The FDA always says use a risk-based approach, and then the other thing is traceability. Right? I think that's if you think about how the FDA thinks about things, those are two really important things, and you should consider as part of, part of your obviously your cybersecurity risk management process, but also things like pen testing and that as a part of it. So.
I wanted to also add to that conversation, because we haven't really talked about it in too much detail. We've spent a lot of time talking about what goes into the product, because that's really the point of that's kind of the point of entry, right? That's the piece of the system that's going to be ultimately problematic from a safety perspective. But there are requirements, and this is where ISO 20001 can help, or a standard, more of a quality management system perspective, is having not just features in your product and that security architecture, but also in your quality management system and your procedures, having a dedicated team resources who can be monitoring when you're looking at your post-market situation, being able to not just monitor, but anticipate and respond to potential security risks. Being able to know in your complaint handling or post-market surveillance, could an issue actually cause additional cybersecurity risks? So having that point of view as well, and having dedicated um, procedures, team, et cetera, around that, it's going to be really important for manufacturers to understand. That might be something that they are new to. So if they can get the security built into their device, they're not done until that post-market side of things, not just in complaint handling, but also in that dedicated security monitoring and being able to respond framework that also has to be in there. So some of those standards can help guide organizations. It's not a required certification for the US, but it is something that might be beneficial to be having on the radar from a overall QMS perspective.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a good reference point and good best practices, but things like, multi-factor authentication, you don't want that on a critical system where a physician has to go and log in, or when there's a patient there that he has to perform some process or procedure on, and he relies on the system. So, we have to look at the use cases as well, which a lot of people just think we need to apply all these controls to everything, but you have to look at the specific use case for that product to see if the controls are going to inhibit um, the use of the product and cause more harm than good.
That's right. And that's a really, really good point, because it really is about that risk benefit analysis and understanding the specific use cases for the medical device. That is really the lens that the medical device manufacturer needs to take.
There were a number of comments as we were talking about hospitals and sort of the sort of issues that hospitals face, et cetera, that shouldn't this be something that the FDA regulates and mandates, et cetera, for hospitals? Um, and the answer is it would be great if someone did, but you have to remember that someone like the FDA is a relatively small agency with a fairly large mandate and not a lot of budget to deal with those things. And so they are very careful about increasing the scope of what it is that they are regulating. And so they have addressed things like EMRs and clinical systems, et cetera, mostly to say, hey, if there's medical device functionality that is somehow in that, then yes, the medical device functionality is something we're regulating. But we are not here to regulate EMRs and clinical systems and hospital systems. That is a whole different thing. There are regulations around that, but that's not the FDA's job. And if it were, they would need a much, much larger budget that Congress is just not going to grant them. And that I think a lot of people in the FDA who also have to deal with drugs and food and other things like that would want to take on. There are folks like Jaco, for example, that are um, do care about these things, but it's not, it's someone else at this point who would need to do that. Certainly in the United States, and NIH, et cetera. There are other folks that would be dealing with those things. Um, you know, there's lots that we would and should change about hospitals and about how we do healthcare in this country. But that's definitely a much bigger conversation than the one we have right now. So, um, I think uh, we've got a number of other questions. I think there are a lot of them that we can answer offline later. I think there were some questions around, for software as a medical device for things outside of the hospital system, for things that are, say, BYOD mobile app types of things. Are there particular considerations there? And, I would say, the answer there is yes. Certainly, if you're doing something that is bring your own device and it's on a patient's own smartphone, you should probably, while smartphone manufacturers are good about maintaining security and invest a lot in that, you should also think about your environment as well, and not assume that everything is secure in your environment. And you should do, encryption at rest, encryption in transit. You should absolutely leverage all of the static code analysis, and do good practices there. Do SBOM management and monitoring. You should leverage all the billions of dollars that Microsoft and Apple and Amazon and Google spend on cybersecurity and all the tools that they provide, because you are in an environment where those are available, and you can do the right kind of monitoring and have much more control over everything that goes in and how you manage those things, right? That's what I'd say to that particular question. Any other comments on that one? Okay, good. Um, let's see. I think there are a lot of very specific questions that I'm not sure that, again, on what are the guidance documents you care about, various other things like that. Megan already mentioned that. I think we've covered a lot here, and maybe some final words from everyone, and then we can wrap this up. Christian, do you want to go first?
Sure. Two things. If you're a medical device manufacturer, I would reverse engineer your product to come up with your timeline and figure out, even from a cost reimbursement strategy, what healthcare delivery organization you want to sell to, which regions, because all that drives your regulatory strategy and your cybersecurity requirements. And then the second thing with cybersecurity, do it early and often, as my CTO likes to say, should be done from design to disposal of your device. It needs to be the entire life cycle.
Very good. Oleg?
Um, I guess a very short sentiment about it. As you might imagine, I am a huge proponent of building medical devices with security in mind from the very beginning. I firmly believe that the days when it was a good view of medical device manufacturer, something which we do because we are good corporate citizens or good citizens of the world, they are over. And we are at the point where devices simply cannot be manufactured without security considerations. Security is a necessary feature of medical device, just the same way as you considering, I don't know, virus coexistence, for instance, something like that. It is, we're getting very close to the point where device will not be able to be sold without those features and successfully deployed in the field. So it is definitely something which now belongs to bare necessity and must do type of features for any product. So I want to leave our audience with this thought in mind.
Very good. Megan, how about you?
I'm going to echo those comments as well. Cyber is a feature of your product, of your platform, and of your portfolio. You need to be thinking about it more broadly, it not only from your product, your design, your architecture, but you also need to be thinking about it as a medical device manufacturer in terms of that hospital IT perspective and your as part of your customer requirements. But there's also the part that you also have to play, which is having those processes, procedures, people who understand cyber, have that deep cyber expertise throughout the full life cycle, pre and post market. So this is definitely something that contributes to safety, and something that manufacturers would it would really help the, from a business perspective, to be thinking about it that way as a value add to the product.
Very good. I'll add my 2 cents, right? We've been in this medical device space for quite some time now, and we've also been, in a world that has gotten ever more connected, with more data and more value generated and more disruption out of the software that's eating the world and the data that's produced and the AI that's eating the software that's et cetera, throughout lots of different industries and throughout society. That's happening in the medical device world. Uh, uh, it is something where the data that you are potentially generating and how that gets fed back in to the overall process potentially gets more valuable than the device itself, and certainly in some areas of the space, so that you if you buy into that, and I think we see that trend more and more in other industries and in this industry, you got to be connected, which means you got to be safe, and you have, and cybersecurity has to be a bigger and bigger part the more connected all of these systems and end up being. So it's not an afterthought. It's not a just do it once. It's got to be throughout the process. So, and that's why we have super smart people like Oleg and Christian and Megan that are, minding the shop in terms of this and pushing us forward. Um, anyway, I'm enjoyed the conversation with you guys. Hopefully, everyone got value out of this. Thank you very much for attending, and thanks to our guests. This has been great. Really enjoyed it. We do this every month, different subjects around medical devices, medical device software, etc. We'll have one next month and a whole series coming up. So please join us for future webinars, and we will send out some summaries afterwards, including answering some of the questions that we didn't get a chance to answer. So thanks everyone, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye bye now.